If you've ever poured your soul into a project, ever believed in the work more than the paycheck, ever thought loyalty was a two-way street, then you know what I'm talking about. My name is Cody. For 22 years, I was the guy you never saw but couldn't operate without. And this is the story of how I learned that the most valuable asset in any company isn't its intellectual property or its stock price. It's the people they foolishly decide they can live without. If you've been there or if you're worried you might be heading there, stick around. You're going to want to hear this. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a boss who smiled to your face while sharpening a knife behind your back, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about turning the tables. The weight of the microphone felt wrong in my hand. It was too light, too flimsy to carry the gravity of the moment. I stood on a brightly lit stage in a cavernous conference hall, the kind with terrible acoustics and overpriced bottled water. The air was thick with the scent of new carpet and nervous ambition. Out in the darkness, I could see hundreds of silhouettes, tech journalists sharpening their digital pencils, investors leaning forward with predatory patience, industry peers ready to applaud or to poach. Behind me, a screen the size of a small house displayed the logo for Nexus, our company's new flagship software, my baby, my masterpiece, and as I had recently discovered, my execution order. My boss, Reese, had just introduced me. He'd laid it on thick, his voice oozing the kind of synthetic charm you only get from a man who has practiced his smile in the mirror. He called me a foundational pillar, a veritable rock star of back-end architecture and the driving force behind Nexus. The applause was polite but energetic. They believed him. I almost did too for a second. Then I caught his eye. There was a gleam in it, a flicker of smug finality that said it all. He thought he was giving me a final, glorious send-off before putting me out to pasture. He was giving me the stage for my last performance, the big demo, and then tomorrow morning a quiet, sterile meeting with HR would be my encore. A man my age, in his late 50s, with my salary, was a liability on a balance sheet, not an asset. Competence, it turns out, is expensive. He handed me the microphone, his hand briefly touching mine. His skin was cool and smooth. Mine felt like sandpaper. He gave me a pat on the shoulder that was meant to look supportive to the audience, but to me it felt like a final push. He expected a demo. He expected me to walk them through the elegant user interface, to show off the lightning-fast data processing, to celebrate the revolution in enterprise management that the marketing team had been screaming about for 6 months. He expected me to sell his vision, built on my foundation. I took a deep breath, the canned air of the convention center filling my lungs. I looked past the blinding spotlights, trying to find a single human face in the void, but there were only shadows. On the giant screen behind me, a smaller window showed our company's stock ticker, green and climbing in anticipation. Everyone was waiting. Reese was smiling his perfect predatory smile from the front row. "Thank you, Reese," I said, my voice steady, amplified to fill every corner of the room. "Thank you for that generous introduction, and thank you all for being here for the launch of Nexus." I paused, letting the silence hang for a beat longer than was comfortable. I could feel a shift in the energy of the room. This wasn't the canned enthusiasm of a product launch. This was something else. "Reese is right," I continued, turning my body slightly so I could see both him and the massive screen. I was the lead engineer on Nexus. I designed its architecture from the ground up. I wrote or supervised every critical line of its code. I have spent thousands of hours, hundreds of sleepless nights making this thing a reality. It is in many ways the culmination of my life's work. I saw Reese nod, basking in the reflected glory. He thought this was all part of the show, the humble, dedicated engineer setting the stage for the big reveal. "And that is why," I said, my voice dropping just a little, drawing them in, "I cannot, in good conscience, allow it to launch. Effective immediately, I am resigning from my position at Innovatech due to a profound and sustained pattern of unethical practices mandated from the highest levels of management." A gasp rippled through the audience. It was a physical thing, a wave of sound that washed over the stage. I saw Reese's smile vanish, replaced by a mask of stunned, chalk-white disbelief. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. In the corner of my eye, I saw a couple of journalists already typing furiously on their laptops, their faces illuminated by the glow of their screens. I didn't give them time to recover. I pulled a small, unmarked USB stick from my pocket. "Reese expected me to give you a demo of the Nexus user interface," I announced, my voice ringing with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. "But the real innovation, the real story, isn't on the surface. It's in the foundation." I walked over to the presentation laptop and plugged in the drive. A few clicks and the slick, branded Nexus interface on the giant screen behind me vanished. It was replaced by a stark black screen filled with cascading lines of brightly colored text. A code editor. "For the past 8 months," I explained, my voice cold and precise, "I have repeatedly warned Reese and the executive committee that a core component of Nexus, what we internally called Project Chimera, was not developed by us. It was stolen." The murmur in the crowd grew into an outright roar. I pointed to a block of code highlighted in red on the screen. "These lines here and thousands more like them were lifted directly from a well-known open-source project, a project protected by a GPL license that explicitly forbids its use in proprietary commercial software without full disclosure and making our own source code public. To launch Nexus would be to engage in willful, flagrant copyright infringement on a massive scale." I started scrolling, showing them file after file. I had prepared this meticulously, side-by-side comparisons. The original open-source code on the left, our proprietary code on the right, identical down to the original developers' comments, which our bargain bin replacement team had been too lazy to even remove. I documented my objections, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. I provided legal opinions from our own counsel, which were ignored. I proposed a plan to build a clean, ethical alternative, which was dismissed as too slow and too expensive. Management made a choice. They chose speed over integrity, they chose profit over principle, and they chose to build their flagship product on a foundation of theft, assuming no one would ever look deep enough to notice. I turned my gaze directly to Reese. His face was a contorted mess of fury and panic. He was half out of his seat, frozen as if his brain couldn't decide whether to charge the stage or run for the exit. "They made one other miscalculation," I said, my voice now quiet but carrying across the suddenly hushed hall. "They assumed the man who built the house wouldn't tell anyone it was set to burn down." I looked up at the giant screen one last time. Past my evidence, past the damning lines of code, the stock ticker in the corner had turned from green to a shocking, visceral red. And it wasn't just red, it was plummeting. It was a digital avalanche, a real-time graph of a multi-billion-dollar corporation's value evaporating because of one man's arrogance. The last thing I saw before I turned my back and walked off that stage, leaving the microphone to clatter on the floor, was that beautiful bleeding line diving straight to the bottom. I didn't run. I walked. My pace was measured, deliberate. Each step was a severing, a clean cut from the person I had been for 22 years. The stunned silence behind me erupted into chaos, a wall of sound, shouting, frantic questions, the stampede of journalists rushing the stage. I felt a hand grab my arm, a panicked security guard with a bead of sweat on his upper lip. "Sir, you can't just—" I didn't even look at him. I just pulled my arm free, a simple, firm motion, and kept walking. He didn't try again. I think he saw it in my eyes. I was already gone. I walked past the Innovatech booth, past the smiling salespeople who now looked like they'd seen a ghost. I walked out of the convention hall's main doors into the cool, gray afternoon of the city. The noise of the street, the traffic, the distant sirens, the chatter of pedestrians felt like a welcome silence after the pandemonium I'd left behind. I didn't have a plan for what came next. My only plan had been to light the match. I just stood on the sidewalk for a moment. The freedom of it all so vast and terrifying it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. My phone started vibrating in my pocket, a frantic, buzzing seizure. I knew it would be Reese, or HR, or the company lawyers. I pulled it out, looked at the cascade of missed calls and frantic texts, and with a sense of profound, liberating finality, I powered it off. I didn't go to a bar. I didn't drive to a scenic overlook to brood. I went home. The house was quiet. My wife, Sarah, was at work. The dog lifted his head from the rug, gave his tail a lazy thump-thump, and went back to sleep. Everything was exactly as I had left it that morning, a perfect diorama of a life that no longer existed. For 22 years I had been Cody, the engineering backbone of Innovatech. Now I was just Cody. The name felt incomplete. The weight of it all, the sheer crushing gravity of what I had done and what had been done to me, finally settled in my bones. It was a cold, heavy feeling. I walked to my home office, the room where I had poured so much of myself into Nexus, and I didn't look at the computer. I went to the closet, pulled out my old worn running shoes, and methodically laced them up. The pavement was unforgiving. I ran without a destination, my feet pounding a rhythm against the concrete that matched the frantic beating of my heart. The city blurred around me, parks and storefronts, underpasses and bridges. It was a punishing pace, fueled by a cocktail of adrenaline, rage, and a grief so deep it felt like a physical injury. With every stride, a memory surfaced, a piece of the story that had led me to that stage. I remembered my first day at Innovatech back when it was a scrappy startup with 20 employees and a visionary founder named Marcus. Marcus was an engineer's engineer. He believed in elegant solutions, in building things that lasted. He hired me not for my resume, but because we spent 2 hours arguing about the merits of different database architectures over a stale pizza. He'd clap me on the back and said, "You're a pain in the ass, you're hired." For 15 years under Marcus, we built something incredible. Our systems were the gold standard in the industry, reliable, secure, and built with an almost fanatical devotion to quality. I wasn't just an employee, I was a creator, a partner in his vision. My loyalty wasn't to a company, it was to the work and to the man who respected it. Then Marcus had a heart attack on the golf course. He was 52. The board, in its infinite wisdom, decided what the company needed wasn't another engineer, but a modern business leader. That's when Reese arrived. Reese was everything Marcus wasn't. He had a Wharton MBA, a wardrobe of impeccably tailored suits, and a vocabulary that consisted almost entirely of buzzwords like synergy, disruption, and paradigm shift. He saw our legacy systems not as assets to be proud of, but as cost centers to be optimized. He didn't understand code, he understood spreadsheets. He couldn't tell a memory leak from a coffee stain, but he could tell you the quarterly cost per employee down to the 10th of a cent. The culture changed overnight. It was a slow, creeping poison. Meetings replaced building. Marketing decks replaced technical specs. The war room, where we used to pull all-nighters fixing critical bugs, was redecorated into a synergy lounge with a ping-pong table that no one ever used. The engineers who pushed back, the ones who shared Marcus's DNA, were gradually managed out, replaced by younger, cheaper developers who knew the latest JavaScript framework but had no concept of long-term stability. I stayed. I stayed because I felt a duty to the systems I had built, a foolish, paternalistic need to protect them from the MBA hordes. I thought my institutional knowledge made me indispensable. It's a common mistake that loyal employees make. They think their history is a shield. In the eyes of a man like Reese, it's a target. The idea for Nexus was mine, an evolution of our core product that I had been sketching out for years. Reese loved it, not for its technical elegance, but for the potential market share. He greenlit it with a massive budget, but with a catch, an impossible timeline. "Speed to market is everything, Cody," he'd said, leaning back in his chair, a picture of relaxed authority. "We need to beat our competitors to the punch, cut whatever corners you have to." That's when Project Chimera was born. One of our competitors had a product with a particularly slick scheduling algorithm. Replicating it from scratch would take a year. But Reese had a consultant he knew, a shady operator, who discovered that a small, obscure European university had published a nearly identical algorithm as part of an open-source research project. The license was a GNU General Public License, version 3. The GPL is not a suggestion, it's a legal framework. It's designed to ensure that software built on it remains free and open. If you use GPL code in your project must also be open source. Using it in a closed-source proprietary product like Nexus was like building a bank and using dynamite for the vault door. It was a ticking time bomb. My first warning was a polite email with the subject line, "Urgent legal concern regarding Project Chimera." I attached the license agreement and a summary of its implications. Reese's reply, a full day later, was a single line, "Legal has been looped in. Focus on integration." I pushed harder. I requested a meeting. In his office, I laid out the case. "Riss, this is not a gray area. This is black and white theft of intellectual property. The moment we launch, we are vulnerable to a lawsuit that could not only cost us millions, but force us to release the entire Nexus source code to the public. It would be corporate suicide." He just steepled his fingers and gave me that condescending, patient smile. "Cody, I appreciate your diligence, I really do. But you're an engineer. You see things in ones and zeros. Business is more nuanced. We have a strategy for this. We'll acquire the university's research department after launch. We'll retroactively license it. It's a calculated risk." It was delusional. It was insane, but he was the boss. All I could do was document it. I sent a final formal memo to him, to legal, and to the entire executive committee, using the strongest possible language. I am formally registering my objection to the inclusion of the Chimera module. I cannot and will not sign off on its release. I advise in the strongest possible terms against this course of action. The memo was never acknowledged, the work continued, and I knew right then that my time was limited. They were using me to build the ship, but they had no intention of letting me sail on it. They needed my expertise to stitch the stolen heart into the body of Nexus. And once the monster was alive, the mad scientist was a liability. It was my mentee, Alex, who confirmed it. Alex was a brilliant young developer, sharp as a tack, and one of the few new hires who actually seemed to care about the craft. I'd taken him under my wing, taught him the history of our systems. He came to my desk a week before the launch, looking pale. "Cody, I saw something I wasn't supposed to," he whispered, glancing around the open-plan office. I was helping Donna in HR with a data migration script. I saw a draft of the post-launch restructuring plan. Your name was on the redundancy list. The termination date is set for the day after the launch. There it was. Not a surprise. Not really. But the cold corporate finality of it still hit me like a punch to the gut. They were going to let me take my bow, soak in the applause for my life's work, and then shove me out the back door with a box of my personal effects the very next morning. It was so perfectly, brutally efficient. So, Reese. My run slowed to a walk. I was miles from home, drenched in sweat, my lungs burning. My legs ached, but my mind was unnervingly calm. The frantic energy had burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. I stood on a bridge overlooking the river, the water below a murky, indifferent gray. For years I had been loyal to an idea, to a memory of a company that no longer existed. My loyalty had been a cage, and Riz had just handed me the key. He thought he was just getting rid of an expensive old engineer. He didn't realize he was creating a man with nothing left to lose. I got home, showered, and sat down at my desk. I pulled my powered-off work phone from my running shorts and dropped it into a drawer, a relic of a past life. I booted up my personal machine. It was time to stop reacting and start planning. My phone had stopped its frantic buzzing. Most of the calls had tapered off, but the screen was a sea of notifications. I ignored the texts from colleagues asking if I was okay, the missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. But two messages stood out. The first was a text from Alex. It was simple. "Holy hell, Cody. You actually did it. The board is in an emergency meeting. What now?" The second was a missed call and a voicemail from a number I knew by heart. It was Arthur Harrison. Harrison wasn't just an investor, he was the investor. He was a stern old money patriarch who had been one of Marcus's earliest backers. He controlled a 20% stake in Innovatech through his family's fund. He was a legend, a kingmaker, and a man who valued competence and integrity above all else. He was the one board member Reese was genuinely afraid of. His voicemail was brief, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that conveyed no panic, only an immense controlled gravity. "Cody, it's Arthur Harrison. Call me on my personal line. We need to talk." That was the catalyst. This was no longer just about my personal grievance. This was about the fate of the company, and I was suddenly holding a very powerful hand. I didn't call him back right away. A move made in haste is a move made from weakness. First, I made another call to a man named David Chen, a corporate lawyer I'd put on retainer 2 weeks ago, the day after Alex had given me the warning. I had paid him a hefty fee out of my own savings for one reason: to be prepared for this exact moment. "David, it's Cody," I said when he picked up. "I saw the news feeds, Cody," he said, his voice calm and professional. "I've been waiting for your call. Are you in a secure location?" "My home office." "Good. First, don't talk to anyone from the company. Not Reese, not HR, not their lawyers. Refer everyone to me. Second, how did they react?" "Chaos," I said. "I didn't stick around to watch, but the stock was already in freefall." "Expected," David said. "They'll try two things. First, they'll threaten you with a lawsuit, breach of contract, violation of your non-disclosure agreement, maybe even trade secret theft, though that'll be ironic. Second, if that doesn't work, they'll try to buy your silence. Don't fall for either. We have a strong case for constructive dismissal and whistleblower protection, given your documented warnings about their illegal activity. Your NDA is likely unenforceable under these circumstances, especially the parts about non-disparagement." We talked for an hour, going over the details. David was methodical, brilliant. He saw angles I never would have. He asked about my employment contract, specifically the intellectual property clauses. "Did you ever work on company projects from home on your own equipment?" "All the time," I said. "Especially for the last year. Reese's open plan office nightmare was impossible to concentrate in." "And your personal projects? Anything related to your work at Innovatech?" A slow smile spread across my face. It was the first time I had smiled all day. "You might say that," I said. This was the part no one knew. Not Reese, not the board, not even Alex. It was my ace in the hole, the real leverage that went far beyond simply exposing their fraud. For the last 6 months, ever since Reese had forced my hand on Project Chimera, I had been living a double life. By day, I was the loyal company man, integrating the stolen code as ordered. But by night, in this very office, on my own time and my own machines, I had been building its replacement. I called it Daedalus. It was a complete, ground-up rewrite of the Chimera module. But it was better, faster, more secure, and most importantly, 100% original. It was my personal protest, my intellectual rebellion. I had architected it, built it, and tested it in a sandboxed environment, a perfect ghost in the machine that mirrored the Nexus architecture. I had poured all my years of experience into it, all the elegant solutions and best practices that Reese and his cost-cutters had dismissed as old-fashioned. Daedalus wasn't just clean code, it was a work of art, my work of art. And under the terms of my employment agreement, which David had reviewed, any IP created on my own time, on my own equipment, without using company resources, was mine, and mine alone. Innovatech hadn't just lost their lead engineer, they had lost their only possible savior, and they didn't even know it yet. "Cody, this is better than I'd hoped," David said, a new energy in his voice. "This isn't just a shield, it's a sword. Don't mention Daedalus to anyone yet. Let them sweat, let them understand the depth of the hole they're in. They need to believe their only option is to try and rebuild from scratch. We let their own incompetence be our greatest advocate." After I hung up with David, I took a deep breath and dialed Arthur Harrison's number. He answered on the first ring. "Cody," he said, skipping the pleasantries. "Is it as bad as it looked on stage?" "It's worse, Arthur," I said, my voice level. "What I showed was just a proof of concept. The Chimera code is woven into the very fabric of Nexus. It's in the data transaction layer, the resource management, even the security protocols. You can't just cut it out. You'd be cutting out the heart, lungs, and spine. The entire system is compromised." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of him breathing. He wasn't a man given to emotional outbursts. He was processing, calculating. And Reese knew about this. He was explicitly warned in writing multiple times by me and by his own legal team. He made a conscious decision to proceed. He called it a calculated risk. A short, dry, humorless laugh came down the line. Risk couldn't calculate his way out of a paper bag. He's a salesman who thinks he's a general. What would it take to fix it? A real fix, not a patch. This was the moment. A complete rewrite of the core modules, I said. If you had a team of top-tier engineers who knew the system architecture intimately and they worked around the clock, you might be looking at 18 to 24 months. And that's optimistic. By then, the company will be a smoking crater. Another silence, longer this time. You were the only one who knew the architecture intimately, weren't you, Cody? I was the architect, I confirmed. And they were planning to fire you, he said. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. The day after the launch, I said. The fools, he muttered almost to himself. The arrogant, short-sighted fools. He paused again, and when he spoke next, his voice was different. It was the voice of a man making a decision. What are you planning to do now, Cody? I'm considering my options, Arthur.
Let me propose one, he said. Forget Innovatech. They are, as you so aptly put it, a smoking crater. But the technology, the original vision that you and Marcus had, that still has value. The clients who signed on for Nexus weren't buying Reese's buzzwords. They were buying the promise of a stable, powerful system, a system you designed.
My heart began to beat a little faster. I knew where this was going. I am pulling my funds capital out of Innovatech, Harrison said, his voice like chipping granite. The board will be notified in the morning. It will be a catastrophic blow to their already shattered stock price. But capital needs a place to go. Good ideas and competent people are always a sound investment. What are you suggesting, Arthur? I asked, even though I already knew. I'm suggesting you finish what you started, he said. Build the damn thing right. Start your own shop. I'll provide the seed capital, not as a loan, but as an investment. You'll be the CEO, the CTO, whatever title you want. You'll have full autonomy. Just build the product you promised. The one Reese was too stupid and arrogant to let you create. For the second time that day, I was speechless. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about vindication. It was about a second chance, a resurrection. There's just one problem, Arthur, I said slowly, a plan beginning to form, David's advice echoing in my mind. Innovatech still owns the Nexus IP, what's left of it, the framework, the user interface, everything except the poisoned heart. Leave that to me, Harrison said, a hint of steel in his tone. Men like Reese only understand one thing, leverage. Right now they think they're in a crisis. They have no idea what a real crisis looks like. We're going to show them. Now go get some rest, Cody. Tomorrow we go to war. The next 72 hours were a blur of intense, focused activity. Following David Chen's advice, I formalized my new reality. I filed the paperwork for a new limited liability company. I didn't want a name that sounded vengeful. I wanted one that sounded like a solution. I called it Phoenix Codeworks. It felt right. Rising from the ashes. David worked with Arthur Harrison's legal team to draft the terms of the seed funding. It was a staggering amount of money, enough to hire a dream team of engineers and operate for 2 years without a single dollar of revenue. Harrison was not messing around. He was making a statement. His trust wasn't in Innovatech anymore, it was in me. Meanwhile, Alex was my inside man, my periscope into the sinking submarine of Innovatech. His text painted a picture of utter chaos. Reese had tried to control the narrative, holding an all-hands meeting where he blamed the launch disaster on an act of industrial sabotage by a disgruntled former employee. He assured everyone that the core IP was sound and that a dedicated task force would have the issues patched within a matter of weeks. According to Alex, no one bought it. The senior engineers knew me. They knew my work ethic, my integrity. They also knew the code base. They couldn't see the stolen parts, not yet, but they could feel that something was deeply wrong. The system was a house of cards, and every time they tried to fix one part, another part wobbled. The dedicated task force was headed by Dylan, the Nepo baby hire Riss had been grooming to be my replacement. Dylan was a recent Stanford grad whose primary qualification was being the son of one of Riss's golf buddies. He was long on confidence and dangerously short on experience. His first attempt to purge the corrupted libraries, as Alex described it, resulted in the complete collapse of the development server, wiping out 2 weeks of work. The panic was escalating from a simmer to a rolling boil. The final piece of my plan was the most delicate. I sat down and drafted a letter. Not a threat, not an ultimatum, but a simple professional business proposal. It was addressed to the Innovatech Board of Directors with a carbon copy to Reese. In the letter, my new company, Phoenix Codeworks, formally offered to license a new proprietary software module to Innovatech. The module, codenamed Daedalus, was described as a fully integrated, cleanroom-developed replacement for the compromised Chimera component. It was a drop-in solution that would fix their core problem, eliminate their legal exposure, and make Nexus functional. Then came the price. I didn't ask for a one-time fee. That would be too simple. I proposed a 5-year exclusive licensing deal with a significant annual fee. The total value of the contract was eye-watering. It was, by my calculation, about 30% more than what it would have cost them to just let me build it right in the first place. I also added a clause for mandatory implementation and transition services to be provided exclusively by Phoenix Codeworks at a premium hourly rate. This gave me control. We wouldn't just be handing over the code, we would be overseeing its integration. We would be in their building, at their tables, directing their remaining staff. The theme was clear, woven into the very language of the proposal. Competence isn't a one-time expense you can cut. It's an ongoing investment. You get what you pay for, and you pay for what you lose. David Chen reviewed the letter, calling it a masterpiece of polite, brutal corporate warfare. He sent it via a secure courier, ensuring it arrived at the peak of their corporate meltdown. Then we waited. The call came 2 days later. It wasn't from the board. It wasn't from their lawyers. It was Reese calling from his personal cell. His number flashed on my screen, and I let it ring twice before answering, letting him savor the anticipation. "Cody," he said. His voice was strained, a thin veneer of authority stretched taut over a core of pure panic. "Reese," I replied, my tone neutral, calm, like I was talking to a caterer. "I got your proposal." He spat the word out like it was poison. "This is a joke, right? You think you can blackmail us, you commit career suicide on a public stage, try to burn this company to the ground, and then you have the nerve to send us this extortion letter." I let him vent. It was the predictable opening salvo, the anger of a man who has lost control and is trying to get it back through sheer volume. "It's not blackmail, Reese," I said when he finally paused for breath. "It's a business offer. Your company has a problem. My company has the solution. The letter details the terms under which we are willing to provide that solution. It's really very simple. We'll see you in court, Cody. We'll sue you into the ground for violating your NDA, for stealing trade secrets." "Stealing?" I interrupted, a hint of ice in my voice. "That's a bold word for you to be using right now, Reese. You're welcome to try. My lawyer, David Chen, is eagerly awaiting your call. He's particularly interested in the discovery phase, where we'd get to depose you and your entire executive team under oath about your decision to knowingly use stolen code. I wonder how your directors and officers' insurance will feel about that." Silence. I had hit the nerve. He knew he had no legal high ground. His threats were hollow, a performance for an audience of one. His tone shifted. He tried to pivot from anger to a pathetic appeal to our shared history. "Cody, come on. We've known each other for years. We built this company. Don't do this. Don't destroy everything Marcus worked for." That was a mistake. Invoking Marcus's name was a line he should not have crossed. "Don't you dare speak his name to me," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Marcus believed in integrity. He believed in quality. You turned his company into a sweatshop built on lies and theft. You were going to fire me the day after I delivered the biggest project of my career. You talk about loyalty? You wouldn't know the meaning of the word. Our shared history ended the moment you decided my 22 years of service was a liability on your spreadsheet. He was sputtering now, his arguments exhausted. What do you want, Cody? Money? Is that it? You want more money? I have money, Reese, I said coolly, thinking of Arthur Harrison's investment. What I want is written in the proposal. My company, Phoenix Codeworks, will solve the problem you created. You will pay us for our expertise. The expertise you so foolishly discarded. Those are the terms. The offer is on the table for 48 hours. After that, we will be engaging with your competitors. I hear they're very interested in a stable, ethically built enterprise management system. I hung up before he could respond. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding not with anger, but with a cold, thrilling sense of victory. The first move had been made. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for them to walk into it. The silence from Innovatech was deafening. For 47 hours there was nothing. No calls from Reese, no letters from their lawyers. It was a war of nerves, and I was content to wait them out. Alex kept me updated. The atmosphere in the office was apocalyptic. Rumors were flying. Key clients were calling, demanding answers about the launch, and the sales team had nothing to tell them. The stock had stabilized, but at a catastrophic low, having shed nearly 70% of its value. The company was bleeding, and the board of directors was getting restless. Then, just as the 48-hour deadline was about to expire, the real power play happened. Arthur Harrison made his move. He didn't just quietly divest. He released a public statement to the financial press. The press release was a work of art. It announced that his fund, Harrison Capital, had sold its entire 20% stake in Innovatech, citing a fundamental loss of confidence in the current executive leadership and their strategic direction. It was a brutal public rebuke. But the second paragraph was the kill shot. Harrison Capital announced it was leading a massive Series A funding round for a new promising tech startup, Phoenix Codeworks. The release described my new company as being founded by veteran industry architect Cody Mitchell and focused on developing next-generation enterprise solutions built on a foundation of integrity and engineering excellence. It was a declaration of war. Harrison hadn't just abandoned the old king, he had crowned a new one. The message to the market was clear. Innovatech is the past. Phoenix Codeworks is the future. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Within hours, my new barely there company website was deluged with traffic. My phone, a new number known only to a handful of people, started ringing. The first call was from the CEO of Omni Group, Innovatech's largest client. They had a $10 million a year contract that was up for renewal. He didn't waste time. Cody, I saw the news. Arthur Harrison is a smart man. He doesn't throw his money away. You and I have worked together for a decade. My loyalty is to the people who get the job done, not to a logo. When can you come in and show me what Phoenix is working on? By the end of the day, I had fielded calls from 3 of Innovatech's top 5 clients. They all said the same thing. They trusted me, not Reese. Their business was on the line, and they needed a partner they could count on. The final blow to Innovatech's crumbling empire came from within. That evening, I got a call from Alex. Cody, he said, his voice filled with a nervous excitement. I just emailed my resignation. So did Maria from QA and Kevin from the database team. We're not the only ones. The word is spreading. The good ones, the ones who remember what this place used to be, we're done. We'd rather work with you in a garage than stay here and watch this place burn. It was a mass exodus. The core talent, the institutional knowledge that remained, was walking out the door. Reese had fired the architect, and now the master craftsmen were following him. A company is not its buildings or its brand, it's the collective skill of its people. And Innovatech's collective skill was migrating to Phoenix Codeworks. The next morning, I received a frantic call from a lawyer I didn't recognize representing the Innovatech board. Reese had been sidelined. The board had taken direct control. Their tone was completely different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading pragmatism. They had a counteroffer. They wanted to hire Phoenix Codeworks, but at a reduced rate. And they had a new proposal. They wanted to acquire us. They would buy Phoenix Codeworks outright, make me the new chief technology officer, give me a board seat, and effectively hand me the keys to the kingdom. It was tempting. It was the ultimate "I told you so." I could walk back into that office not as a disgraced employee, but as its conquering hero. I called David Chen and told him about the offer. "Don't take it," he said without a moment's hesitation. "It's a trap, Cody, a golden cage. The moment you sign that paper, they own you again. They'll own Daedalus. They'll own your team. You'll be the CTO, yes, but you'll still answer to a board that at its core doesn't respect you. They're not offering you power, they're offering you a leash. Right now you have all the leverage. You are an independent nation. Don't be so quick to become a colony again." He was right. This was never just about getting my old job back. It was about building something new, something on my own terms. It was about freedom. I had David call their lawyer back with our response. Our original offer stood. No negotiations, no acquisition. They could either be our first and biggest client, or we would go and build a better future with their old clients and their best employees. The choice was theirs. They took less than an hour to capitulate. The signed contract arrived by email, a formal surrender. Phoenix Codeworks was officially in business. The first meeting was surreal. I walked through the glass doors of the Innovatech headquarters, a place I had entered every workday for 22 years. But this time it was different. I wasn't an employee. I was a vendor, a savior for hire. Alongside me were Alex, Maria, and Kevin, the first official employees of Phoenix Codeworks. We were a small elite team walking into the heart of a fallen empire. The receptionist, a woman who had given me a sad, pitying look on my last day, now stared at me with a mixture of awe and terror. We were shown to the main boardroom, the one with the $1,000 chairs and the view of the city. The remaining members of the executive team were already there, looking pale and defeated, and at the far end of the table sat Rhys. He looked smaller than I remembered. His expensive suit seemed to hang off him. The confident, smug energy was gone, replaced by a gray, hollowed-out exhaustion. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the polished surface of the table. I didn't sit at the side. I took the chair at the head of the table, the one that used to be reserved for the CEO. I opened my laptop, and the Phoenix Codeworks logo illuminated the screen. "Good morning," I said, my voice calm and commanding. "I'm Cody Mitchell, CEO of Phoenix Codeworks. This is my team. As per our agreement, we are here to oversee the integration of the Daedalus module and restore functionality to the Nexus platform. We will require full administrative access to all your systems and the complete cooperation of your remaining technical staff. Kevin will be handling the database migration. Maria will lead the quality assurance and testing. Alex will be my lead on the code integration. We have a very aggressive timeline. Let's begin." I ran the meeting with cold, professional efficiency. I assigned tasks. I set deadlines. I answered technical questions with a precision that left no room for debate. The Innovatech executives, men and women who had ignored my warnings for months, now hung on my every word. They were taking notes like first-year students in a lecture they couldn't afford to fail. I never once addressed Rhys directly. I treated him like a piece of furniture, an irrelevant fixture in a room where important work was being done. The humiliation was a quiet, suffocating thing. He was a king in his own throne room, being utterly ignored by the man he had tried to banish. The project took 6 weeks of grueling, intensive work. My team was brilliant. We were fueled by coffee, pizza, and a shared sense of purpose. We were not just fixing a piece of software. We were proving a point. We were demonstrating the immense tangible value of competence, experience, and integrity. On the last day after the final stable build was deployed to the production servers, I was packing up my laptop in the boardroom. Rhys walked in. It was the first time we had been alone since the fateful launch event. "It's done," he said. His voice was a hoarse whisper. "Yes," I said, not looking at him. "It's done." "You destroyed me, you know," he said, a note of bitter self-pity in his tone. "The board asked for my resignation. It's effective Monday." I finally looked up at him. There was no anger left in me, no hatred, just a profound, weary sense of pity. He still didn't get it. "I didn't destroy you, Rhys," I said, my voice even. "Your own arrogance did. You had a choice. You could have listened. You could have valued the expertise you had instead of the shortcuts you wanted. You saw me as a cost to be cut, not an asset to be valued. This wasn't a personal vendetta. It was just the bill for that decision finally coming due. I closed my laptop and slid it into my bag. I walked towards the door, pausing as I passed him. You were right about one thing, though, I said quietly. It really was all about speed to market, but you forgot the most important part of any launch. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a confused, defeated emptiness. What's that? The landing, I said. Then I walked out of the room, out of the building, and I never looked back. It's been a year since that day. Phoenix Codeworks is thriving. We have a sleek, modern office downtown, not far from the Innovatech building, a constant reminder of how far we've come. We have 25 employees now, all of them top-tier talent, all of them hand-picked for their skill and their character. We have a dozen major clients, including most of Innovatech's former top accounts. Innovatech itself is still a client, though a much smaller, humbler one. They survived, but they are a shadow of their former selves, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms across the industry. My name is on the front door. My team is a family, bound by mutual respect and a passion for building things the right way. I come to work every day feeling not a sense of dread, but a sense of purpose. I'm no longer just a pillar holding up someone else's roof. I'm the architect of my own house. So what's the moral of the story? What's the lesson I learned through all this? It's actually pretty simple. It's a phrase I find myself thinking about a lot. Competence isn't cheap until you lose it. Companies and bosses like Reese make a fundamental, catastrophic error in judgment. They look at loyal, experienced people and they see a cost. They see a line item on a budget that can be trimmed. They mistake quiet, steady competence for a lack of ambition. They mistake loyalty for weakness. They forget that your skills, your experience, your integrity, and the relationships you've built over decades are not their assets to command. They are your property. You own them. The most valuable thing you possess is your own professional worth, and you should never, ever let anyone else set the price for it. They might be able to take your job, they might be able to take your title, but they cannot take your value unless you let them. They cannot erase your competence. And sooner or later they will discover just how much it costs to replace it. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been made to feel like a line item on a spreadsheet, I want to hear about it. Tell me your story in the comments below. The world of work can be a brutal place, but it helps to know you're not alone. And if you want to see more stories about the moment the scales of justice finally balance, make sure you like this video, share it with anyone who needs to be reminded of their own worth. And of course, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss what comes next.